This week on Who Deserves to Be Inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, we look at the case for putting INXS into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. This week, we make the case for putting the Sydney, Australia band INXS into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. As we always do when we make an argument, we'll start with the stats. So, with all that said, to the tail of the tape we go. INXS released 12 studio albums, 12 compilation albums, 4 live albums, and 5 EPs. Of those, 5 hit the top 40 in America, with 2 of those 5 hitting the top 10. 1987's Kick, their biggest selling album, hit number 3 on the Billboard Albums chart and sold 6 million copies. 1990's X, or 10, if you will, hit number 5 and went double platinum. Their 1985 album, Listen Like Thieves, went double platinum and just missed the top 10, topping out at number 11. They had 2 other studio albums and 1 live album go platinum in America and 1 other studio album go gold. In the UK, 5 studio albums, 1 live album, and 1 greatest hits album went top 40. Of those, 4 studio albums, 1 live album, and 1 greatest hits album went top 10, with 1992's studio album Welcome to Wherever You Are going to number 1. They had 5 gold albums, 2 platinum albums, and 1 multi-platinum album, that of course being their biggest seller, Kick, which went triple platinum in the UK. In their native Australia, there was a lot more success, with 17 albums and 1 EP going top 40. Of those, 12 went top 10, with 3 studio albums and 1 compilation album going to number 1. Strangely, their biggest selling worldwide album, Kick, was not one of the ones that hit the top spot in Australia. Kick actually topped out at number 2. INXS had 4 gold albums, 5 platinum albums, and 7 multi-platinum albums. 1 compilation album and 2 studio albums went double platinum. Listen Like Thieves went 4 times platinum. 1984's The Swing went 6 times platinum. Kick went 7 times platinum, but surprisingly is still not their biggest selling album ever. That honor goes to their 2011 compilation album, The Very Best, which went 8 times platinum and came out almost 15 years after lead singer Michael Hutchinson's untimely death in 1997. INXS also released 71 singles. Of those, 25 hit the top 40 on the various American charts, with 16 of those going top 10, including 2 that hit number 1. In the UK, 18 hit the top 40, but only 1 hit the top 10. 1987's Need You Tonight, which hit number 2. In Australia, 37 songs hit the top 40, with 11 of those hitting the top 10, including 1983's Original Sin, which was their only number 1 song down under, surprisingly. To go along with Original Sin and Need You Tonight, INXS also had other hit songs such as Don't Change, Kick, New Sensation, Devil Inside, Listen Like Thieves, Never Tear Us Apart, The One Thing, I Send a Message, What You Need, This Time, and way too many others to put down here. INXS were nominated for 3 Grammy Awards, winning none of them. They won 5 MTV Video Music Awards out of 11 nominations, all 5 wins coming from their music video for Need You Tonight / Mediate. Internationally, they won 2 Brit Awards out of 4 nominations. They were nominated for 1 Juno Award and won 1 World Music Award back in 1993 for Best Selling Australian Artist. In their native Australia, they won 6 ARIA Music Awards out of 18 nominations and were inducted into the ARIA Hall of Fame in 2001. Their song Never Tear Us Apart is on Rolling Stone magazine's 500 Greatest Songs of All Time list. During the early 1980s, INXS was actually considered a college band. Their first 2 albums were quirky and different. By the time their 3rd album came around, they had found their signature sound of power pop rock mixed with dance music, with strange chords thrown in sometimes, all topped off by one of the most underrated singers of all time, Michael Hutchins. The man didn't just sing the words, he massaged the hell out of every single syllable. Plus, he was the perfect frontman. The band's heyday was in the mid-1980s to the early 1990s, but during that time, they racked up a ton of hits. Once they lost Michael prematurely, the band put out a couple more albums with new lead singer J.D. Fortune and then Syrian Gribin, but had limited success until their eventual performance retirement in 2012. There has not been an official breakup of the band, just merely a very extended hiatus of 13 years and counting at this point. As far as their influence goes, they definitely helped out a lot of Australian bands to make it big. Plus, the list of international artists who have listed them as a major influence include Maroon 5, The Killers, Daniel Bedingfield, The 1975, Imagine Dragons, and Robbie Williams. They are the third biggest selling Australian act in America, right behind AC/DC and the Bee Gees, with 15 million albums sold. Worldwide, they've sold 50 million albums. That's 50. There have been some arguments put forth as to why they should not be inducted. One says that their commercial peak wasn't too long. I'm sorry, but that's not even remotely close to being true. Granted that the albums Kick and X were a few years apart, but they had hit songs ever since the early 1980s, like The One Thing and Don't Change. In fact, they had a good decade of churning out hits. Another argument says that their influence isn't profound enough. Again, not true, because regardless of how you personally feel about these other bands, it is hard to listen to Imagine Dragons and Maroon 5 and not hear INXS's influence. The real reason is that even though they've been eligible for the Hall since 2006, the Hall has not been keen on putting in power pop rock bands of the 1980s and 90s, but would rather put in artists who are, shall we say, more questionable? I'll leave that right there. I'm not going to throw any artists under the bus right now. There has been an effort, and continues to be an effort, by a number of private groups to try to get INXS inducted. You can find them online on YouTube and Instagram and others. I am not an official member of any of these groups, but I approve their message. If those quote-unquote questionable artists can get in, and 80s and 90s bands now have a clear chance of getting in, then I don't see why INXS cannot get into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, because they absolutely deserve to be inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. And that is it for who deserves to be inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. We also invite you to check out our other podcast, the Music History Today podcast, where we go over what happened on that date in music history. That podcast drops daily, including weekends, on this channel that you're either watching or listening to this podcast on. We also have the Music History In-Depth podcast, where we go more in-depth into the events that happened for that week in music history. And that podcast posts every Tuesday on this channel that you're either watching or listening to this podcast on. Thank you very, very much for listening or watching if you're on YouTube or Spotify.